particular instance, I do remember hearing that we had received a request from the White House to make sure that we evaluated this tweet and that they wanted it to come down because it was a derogatory statement directed towards the president.
They wanted it to come down. They made that request.
To my recollection, yes.
I thought that was an inappropriate action by a government official, let alone the White House. But it wasn't Joe Biden about his son's laptop. It was Donald Trump because he didn't like what Chrissy Teigen had to say about him. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
My. You ever think it's appropriate for the President of the United States to direct or otherwise influence a social media company to take down its content?
I think it's a very slippery slope.
Mr. Roth, Ms. Gaddy, Mr. Baker, any evidence that Joe Biden's ever done that?
Certainly none that I'm aware of, no.
I don't recall anything like that.
I'm sorry, that President Biden did what, sir?
Has Joe Biden ever called Twitter, to your knowledge, or his White House at his behest to take down content or urge you to take down content?
I don't know the answer to that question, sir.
Well, I'm going to have to conclude at least from 3 of the 4, you don't know. There's no evidence he's ever done that, but there's plenty of evidence Donald J. Trump tried to do that. And if we're going to have a hearing about the misuse of social media and the intrusion of government in the content on social media, we've got an environment-rich target, but it's not Joe Biden. It's Donald J. Trump, and of course, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about Russian bots and Russian fabrications using fake accounts on Twitter to a political purpose, and it's not to help elect Democrats. And we don't want to talk about 4 years of Donald Trump manipulating the truth and trying to manipulate social media and threaten it, or directly to try to shape it by taking down content because it was critical of him personally. And that's what we ought to be talking about as we move forward, not the subject of today's hearing. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Donalds for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, Mr. Roth, you've stated already that what happened with the New York Post story was similar to the hack and leak scenarios from 2016. You also said that you actually were opposed to deleting the New York Post story. Who advocated for the removal of the New York Post story?
The company's decision to treat it as a violation.
Mr. Roth, who at the company actually went over your recommendation? Because you're pretty high up. Who overrode you?
The decision was communicated to me by my direct supervisor.
Who was that person?
Her name was Del Harvey. She was the vice president of trust and safety at the time.
All right, thank you so much. Ms. Gaddy, real quick, you said to the chairman earlier, and I want to paraphrase what I heard earlier, is that Twitter had no contact with anybody from the Biden team. Is that correct to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Put that up for me. Okay, over my right shoulder, we have an email. Reference, this is Saturday, October 24th, 5:39 p.m., referencing 5 different tweets. This is with a Twitter email chain. Under the line, it's more to review from the Biden team. Does anybody have a comment on how much interaction was happening with the Biden team at Twitter with respect to tweets that they wanted Twitter to review? Ms. Gaddy, Mr. Roth?
I'm not familiar with this email.
So you're not familiar with this email, Mr. Roth? Are you familiar with this email?
Only from what's been reported in the Twitter files.
Did you ever have contact with anybody from the Biden team?
No, sir, I did not. We explicitly separated the teams that would interact with campaigns from teams like mine that were responsible for content moderation.
How big was the organization in Twitter that was actually working with campaigns?
I couldn't say for sure.
Did you ever have any contact with the DNC?
Directly? No, I did not.
Did anybody at Twitter have any contact with anybody at the DNC?
I think it's likely that somebody at Twitter did, yes.
In these emails, it's listed that these are tweets that had to be flagged from the Biden team. That's what's in the files. You have no idea how many people actually engaged with the Twitter team or how frequently that engagement happened.
No, and again, that was by design. We kept those functions separate from content moderation so that we could impartially assess reports like this.
Do you know how many tweets were actually flagged and taken down at the behest of the Biden team?
I wouldn't agree with the characterization of it as being at the behest of them. These tweets were reported, and Twitter independently evaluated them under its rules.
But the email is very clear. More to review from Biden team. The response 3 hours later at the bottom, hold this up real quick so we can see. The request at the bottom, it says, handled these. What does handled these mean?
My understanding is that these tweets contained non-consensual nude photos of Hunter Biden, and they were removed by the company under.
Hold on, real quick, Mr. Roth. How could you know so much about the content of these tweets? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, these are just web addresses. I don't know what's in these tweets. You have these things committed to memory that you know the content, but you don't know who you talk to at the Biden team?
Sir, I didn't meet with the Biden team, but there was extensive public reporting about these tweets specifically that uncovered what they were.
You know the contents of the tweets. It was obviously at Twitter, but you have no idea how often people who worked in your organization had with the Biden team during the end of the 2020 presidential elections.
I would emphasize that the people who interfaced with the campaigns were not part of my team or organization. I would know what the interactions were if they were on my team. It was a different part of the organization, not mine.
Let me ask you a separate question, and I'll ask it of you too, Mr. Baker. Have you guys been able to quantify the amount of in-kind contributions associated with taking down the New York Post story? Because the New York Post story was down for 2 weeks, give or take. Do you have any understanding of how much that story was limited by Twitter and also by other social media companies? What the impact of an in-kind contribution that would be to the Joe Biden presidential election in 2020?
I don't know the answer to that question, sir.
Do you think it's big?
I don't know the answer.
Do you think it's more than a maximum contribution to a campaign?
I wouldn't want to speculate.
Would you call it 25,000?
I don't know the answer to that question.
100,000?
Sir, I don't know the answer to the question.
$1 million?
I don't know the answer to the question.
Do you think Twitter will be in violation of federal election laws with the size of an in-kind contribution to take down a story, which is true, by the way, because you guys thought you knew something with limited information?
I'm not going to speculate on that sitting here today, sir. I try to propound a legal analysis of election laws.
I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. It's your turn. You want to go? Okay. We won't start the clock till you get there.
Appreciate also your generosity. I just want to start off right here at the top here. This isn't even my line of questioning, but I'd like to submit to the record a Washington Post article now warning about Hunter Biden laptop disinformation, the guy who leaked it. Here's the deal. Before I even get into my questions, I think that the story here with the Washington Post reporting is that what they're saying right here, when the New York Post first reported in October 2020 that it had obtained contents of a laptop computer allegedly owned by Joe Biden's son Hunter, there was an immediate roadblock faced by other news outlets that hoped to corroborate reporting, as many did. The newspaper wasn't sharing what it obtained. New York Post had this alleged information and was trying to publish it without any corroboration, without any backup information. They were trying to publish it to Twitter. Twitter did not let them, and now they were upset. I believe that political operatives who sought to inject explosive disinformation with the Washington Post couldn't get away with it. And now they're livid. And they want the ability to do it again. They want the ability to inject this again. So they've dragged a social media platform here in Congress. They're weaponizing the use of this committee so that they can do it again. A whole hearing about a 24-hour hiccup in a right-wing political operation. That is why we are here right now. And it's just an abuse of public resources, an abuse of public time. We could be talking about health care. We could be talking about bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. We could be talking about abortion rights, civil rights, voting rights. But instead, we're talking about Hunter Biden's half-fake laptop story. I mean, this is an embarrassment. But I'll go into it. Ms. Navarrete, let's talk about something real. I'd like to show you a tweet posted by former President Trump about my colleagues and I on July 14, 2019. It says in part, quote, "Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Then come back and show us how it's done. These places need your help badly. You can't leave fast enough. I'm sure that Nancy Pelosi would be very happy as quickly to work out free travel arrangements." A day or two after that, Donald Trump publicly incited, violence at a rally, targeting 4 congresswomen, including myself, saying, "Go back to where you came from." Ms. Navaroli, as I understand it, you were the most senior member of Twitter's content moderation team, or a senior member of Twitter's content moderation team when this was posted. As part of your responsibilities, did you review this tweet?
Yes, it was my team's responsibility to review these tweets.
And what did you conclude?
My team, Ray, made the recommendation that for the first time we find Donald Trump in violation of Twitter's policies and use the public interest interstitial.
For the first time?
Yes.
And at the time, Twitter's policy included a specific example when it came to banned abuse against immigrants, as they specifically included the phrase, "go back to your country," or go back to where you came from, correct?
Yes, that was specifically included in the content moderation guidance as an example.
You brought this up to the Vice President of Trust and Safety, Del Harvey, correct?
I did, yes.
And she overrode your assessment, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And something interesting happened after she overrode your assessment. A day or two later, Twitter seemed to have changed their policies, didn't they?
Yes, that trope, "go back to where you came from," was removed from the content moderation guidance as an example.
So Twitter changed their own policy after the president violated it in order to potentially accommodate his tweet?
Yes.
Thank you. So much for bias against right wing on Twitter. Additionally, Ms. Navaroli, are you familiar with the account Libs of TikTok?
I have heard of it from the news, yes.
Mr. Roth, are you familiar with this account?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Are you aware that from August 11th to August 16th, that account posted false information about Boston Children's Hospital, claiming that they were providing hysterectomies to children?
Yes, I am aware of that and other claims from the account.
And are you aware that this lie was then circulated by other prominent far-right influencers?
Yes.
And are you aware that all these claims, which I have reiterated were false, culminated in a real-life harassment and ultimately a bomb threat to the Boston Children's Hospital?
Yes, I am aware.
And this account is still on that platform today, isn't it?
Regrettably, yes, it is.
Despite inspiring a bomb threat due to the right-wing incitement of violence against trans Americans in this country, because they cannot let go of this obsession with fixating violence and inciting violence against trans and LGBT people, in addition to immigrants, in addition to women of color. This is a party that cannot pick on anyone their own size. And they are trying to co-opt an entire social media platform and use the power of this committee and of Congress in order to pursue a political agenda. I yield back.
Lady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Fry for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This hearing shows who really has been in control of what is said to be one of the world's most widely used websites, Twitter. The American people probably didn't know who these witnesses were today, but these witnesses were powerful enough to silence an American president with just a few clicks from their California office. We're also learning that some of those in Washington, D.C. have forgotten their role and exercised their power to achieve ends antithetical to American principles of free speech and expression. The FBI is the lead federal agency responsible for investigating foreign influence operations. However, in recent years, the FBI has devoted countless amounts of time, taxpayer money, and manpower to combating Russian foreign influence on social media. The FBI, as one reporter noted, acted as a, quote, doorman to the vast program of social media surveillance and censorship encompassing agencies across the federal government, from the State Department